Someone with a serious mental illness would be, just kind of mental picture, would be someone who can't function on their own and definitely needs a lot of support and a lot of help to kind of get by through life.
There's slower learning than others.
My sister.
Even if we don't mean to, the general population sees people with mental health issues in that movie kind of way. You know, the wild hair and the eyes and, and they're scary.
Some people with mental illness certainly are violent. Some people without mental illness are violent as well. The data shows that people with mental illness are less likely to commit a violent crime than those who are just average, what we would think average citizens.
And the reality is that if we walked down the same street, you wouldn't know that I had a mental illness any more than maybe the person standing next to me.
And the truth of the matter is people with mental health issues are 1 in 4 people in the U.S. population on any given year.
People with mental illness face challenges that are related to their illness. They face challenges, more importantly, from stigma. People believing that they can't do things in the community.
People with mental illness, I believe, do not fully recover. They have good days and bad days and stuff.
Yes, I do feel that people with mental illness do get better because they learn more and they're eager to learn.
People can absolutely recover from mental illness, and that's one of the most exciting things I think about my work today, is that people do recover at a much greater rate than they used to 25, 30 years ago.
I've seen it. I've seen that there is a tremendous hope for recovery, and it really depends on the person that has mental illness and the people around them that support them or work with them.
I think one of the most important parts of a recovery attitude is that you don't wait until somebody is all better to declare that they are recovered. And you don't wait until all their symptoms are gone to begin to expect that they can participate in all the things that all of us want to participate in.
And I think it's important to note that recovery is going to look different for each person, but absolutely, recovery not only can happen, but it happens every day. It happens every moment that someone gets up and makes that choice. Today, I'm going to move forward with some part of my life, and that's recovery. And for that, you thank God, and you know that miracles can happen.
I was 29 years old, and I had a complete mental breakdown, including a psychotic episode. But it turns out later I had subsequent breakdowns, and so the diagnosis was later changed to paranoid schizophrenia. I used to surf at the time. I heard this voice say, "Get out of the water." I didn't know if they're talking to me or somebody else, and so I ended up getting out of the water and going home, and these voices were influencing me. And it's disturbing. I was afraid for my life. I thought my neighbor was trying to kill me. And so the only way to save myself was to assault him. And I had another breakdown, and they put me under the Department of Mental Health wing of the prison.
I started really having trouble with mental health issues in high school, near the second half of high school. And I'd always been a great student, involved in everything, and really started struggling near the end. Instead of going off to college like all of my friends were and I had planned to do, I ended up spending the next several years going to therapy, in the hospital a lot. Well, just day to day, emotions were torturous. Nothing made me feel better. I just felt horrible all the time, and I really wanted to be a part of things and be a part of my family and still be a part of my circle of friends, but at the same time I always felt awkward around everybody because I wasn't who I used to be.
You know, I've been through a lot with my family, having drug addiction and stuff like that. And when I got to school, I was also had to deal with a lot of racism. So, you know, my early days in schools, I was being called all kinds of names by parents, the kids, you know, people called it back then was ADHD. And for me, like, I kind of used, like, my family being a part, you know, my issues with focusing in school. I used that as leverage to mess up and get involved in the wrong things, get involved with gangs, selling drugs, all kinds of stuff. And it's kind of like survival of the fittest. And I was scared that, you know, I'd end up in jail and then lose everything.
I didn't want to face the world at all. I didn't want to leave my apartment. I didn't want to get out of my bed. I didn't want to go to work. I didn't want to see my friends. I didn't want to answer the phone. Something that really struck a chord with me is a quote from Abraham Lincoln. I must get better or I will die. I cannot remain here, because he suffered from depression too. And that really, I remember that. I can't stay here. Things are going to have to get better or I'm going to have to die. Things were horrible, and having a diagnosis was a little bit of a relief, where I could understand why I was having so much trouble.
These are my twin daughters at age 4, and this was before we knew that bipolar disorder would be coming down the line. That's extremely difficult. You become very isolated. You don't talk to neighbors about your child when they're in a psychiatric hospital, because you don't want your child to be isolated or stigmatized or made fun of when they come out of the hospital. So as a family, you start to go into these very dysfunctional, covert ways of being out of love for your child and trying to protect them from something that most people in the world don't understand and is highly stigmatized.
There wasn't a specific point that was a bottom for me. There was a period where I'd been kicked out of everything, I'd been fired from everything, in and out of jail, and not really knowing what to do or where to go. I was riding along the street, pedaling along, and 2 state patrol cars go along, and I didn't think anything of it. Got back to about a block away from where I had my stuff. Those patrol cars were at that place. They were raiding the place. At that point, I'd been in and out of jail a few times. And it wasn't that I didn't want to go to jail, which I didn't, but I didn't want to live like that anymore. I had no place to go. I couldn't go retrieve my belongings. So I just kind of wandered around for a couple of days after that. In a way, the people who initiated my recovery were the people I was hanging out with. I didn't want to be like them anymore. I didn't want to. I wanted to move away from them.
The most important thing in my recovery process has been personal responsibility. That I'm the one that needs to do the work.
One of the most important things in my recovery is to not take myself so seriously.
Coming to terms that I had a mental illness, but it didn't have to define me. I could define me. And that was my very first step.
Okay, 2, 3.
When I realized that things were getting better was after the medication, after I got the shot of haloperidol, the medication. It brought me around just like that. The voices were gone, and I felt like participating again. I didn't feel like withdrawing, being isolated.
There wasn't really a catalyst towards my recovery until the thing that I think really brought it down to earth was I remember waking up one morning in the emergency room. I was there a lot. It just kind of occurred to me that I didn't want to do this anymore. This wasn't what I wanted, and this wasn't where I was supposed to be, and it wasn't like everything changed overnight from there, but that was the moment when I really thought there's something way better out there for me, and I'm really going to start working it.
I also had a time when I had lowered myself, the caliber of the company I was keeping, and it finally, that was falling faster and I could lower my standards, and I found that other people were pointing at me saying, at least I'm not as bad as that guy. We like to be independent and have our own choices, and I wanted to do things my way, and some of the things that my way wasn't the most healthy way of coping with things. I was being treated for depression and taking antidepressants and continued to drink and smoke pot, and you know, some people can do those things, but it was interfering with my mental health. I decided I had to quit all of that.
What was the kind of turning point? Was there one single instance that kind of where you started going in the direction of recovery?
Well, I had gotten in a fight with this female and I won, but I got caught by the police. Okay. And I went to jail for just one day, and they had this new program called PR or whatever, and they PR'd me, which means that if I didn't get in trouble for 3 months, that I would not have charges on my record, and I wouldn't have to pay a bunch of fines and stuff. And so I was like, I gotta stay out of trouble. And then my boyfriend, he introduced me to Youth in Action, and I was just like, you know, this could be a good outlet for me while I figure out what I want to do with my life. So I went to the first meeting, and you know, people understood me. They, you know, understood my story. I felt like I wasn't being judged, things like that. And it was kind of freeing for me to, like, you know, move forward and get past all that negativity.
Yes, my recovery required a new everything, absolutely everything. The thing that had to change the most was my perception that I was in control. Any idea that I had in my mind that I was in charge or doing anything right, I was way off. I was way off. Had to let go of that.
The most important action I took in my recovery was to take medication.
The most important action that I took in my recovery was to stop drinking and using drugs.
To show up.
Well, I think first of all, there's the need for recognition that there is help that is out there.
I think really a key is having support, having a support network around you, and that's why the use of peer specialists and peer support people has been very helpful.
Regaining a sense of hope as you learn about the disorder, as you connect with other peers, as you connect with other parents.
It's very important that there is self-awareness. So when someone is in recovery, they are self-aware of their triggers, of their needs.
The medication helped, and that got me on the road to recovery. Work therapy, part of your stay there was participating in work at the hospital. Eventually I took classes in printing. When I got out of the hospital, I got a job at a print shop based on my experiences at the hospital.
All of us want to matter. All of us want to love and be loved. All of us want to have a space that we live in that is comfortable and reflects us. I think every adult wants to be doing something effective and powerful to impact the world. And recovery is all about each person discovering what the version of that is in their lives. And so as I see people recover, I see them going from being focused on their medication and their symptoms, being fretful of the night, being fretful of the future, and instead I see them much more interested in what they can create, what they're doing, who they're making laugh, who they're touching with their story.
At first in my recovery, I had to kind of just work enough to get by. And I was in a job that I'd been in for 13 years, and I stayed there and continued to work to be able to survive. In my recovery, look at different strengths that I have and different things that I'd like to do. I'm a peer support specialist here, which means I get to use my story and my experience in recovery and the successes that I've had and the kinds of things that have worked for me. I get to use that to inspire hope and empower people in a similar situation.
My recovery journey started kind of from an addiction perspective, and as a result of that, I've been able to explore what I call my character defects, and I believe that every defect I have has an opposite asset side. So every defect I have, whether it's being deceitful, that becomes truthfulness. Self-centeredness becomes selflessness. In terms of my own recovery, that's what I strive for, is to have those defects removed, dealt with. I'm under no impression that I'm ever going to be flawless, but I've accepted that about myself. My recovery journey does not depend on me being flawless.
You know, I was comfortable where I was at. I was on Social Security disability, and that was my world. Going to therapy and going home, and there's this scary space where you're kind of in between, where you're not real safe, because there's that dream out there of having a home and having a family and having a job, but you gotta take a step away from the comfort zone for a really long time before you end up in that far off, safe again place.
For me, it's just having a better lifestyle than I was given. You know what I'm saying? Like, I love my mom, and I even love my dad too, even though he wasn't there. You know what I'm saying? But I feel like I should be better. They went through all what they went through, and now it's my turn to step up and, you know, provide a better life for myself and my community.
The most important support in my recovery is the people that are in my church and my family.
I want to say it's my therapist, but I'm sure she would remind me that it's me.
Was my children.
One of the most important supports in my recovery is my wife.
Some other things that were important in my recovery was the support of my family. Their ideology of work, not just do nothing, they think you should do something, whether it's volunteering or working or...
I think the most important thing for a family member to know is that it's so important, even if you have anger and guilt and resentment and all these emotions directed towards that person, then it's really, really important not to say, oh, well, you couldn't do it last time, and, oh, well, yeah, you tried that before and it didn't work, and to really, really try to refrain from that, because they're already doing enough of that to themselves without having any help. And if they can't count on you for positive reinforcement and unconditional positive regard, because I've seen so many people say, so, you know, well, they just thought I was going to do the same old thing anyway, so I did.
I like to walk. I like to go trout fishing. That's part of being healthy. Walking is exercise. It also is good for depression. I've had some times where I've having suicidal thoughts. Just the act of walking, going to the lake, sitting there, thinking, feeling better, the thoughts pretty much went away, and I felt better for myself, and I walked home.
Little victories are essential. That's what makes continuing worth it. If it's only the big thing, you've missed it, because recovery is a journey. It's a step by step.
Just those little things that maybe don't seem big, but in the context of conquering something as big as a mental illness, they're huge. And so things like going back to college and finishing a quarter, you know, not having to drop out halfway through, and then eventually having finished a year, or you know, staying out of the hospital for a month, staying out of the hospital for 6 months.
I was living in a clean and sober home, and for the first time in 15 years I moved out without somebody telling me to get the heck out of there. That was pretty significantly different, to move with people saying, we're going to miss you.
The greatest reward that I can think of in my recovery is just to be alive.
The greatest joy in my recovery is knowing that I'm strong enough to get through what I've been through.
The greatest joy in my recovery is the difference I've had in personal relationships with people I love.
The greatest joy of my recovery is living life to its fullest and loving it.
Well, I think that some examples of recovery is having your own bank account, being able to write a check, buying your groceries, getting a job.
I knew it was a real turning point when I could go to the grocery store and buy groceries and take a cab home instead of going to the store and buying a few groceries and taking them home in my little cart because I didn't have any money.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a really big turning point for me.
Mm-hmm. I love coming home from work and coming out here and working in the yard and just looking around and realizing that this is mine. I earned all this and I can paint the wall whatever color I want.
It's seeing your daughter come home from high school thrilled because for the first time somebody's asked her to go out on a date.
It's the person that's lived on the street for 15 years that has never been stabilized, has never been able to continue their meds, to be able to get that connection, get a home, and all the pieces fall together.
How are you feeling this morning? In personal relationships that I have with people. I had no idea that things would be this good. In trying to avoid my feelings of depression, I did things that also muted my feelings of happiness. It's like the first time you taste pineapple, fresh pineapple. Who knew?
Mental illnesses are not that different from any other kind of illness. The brain is an organ, it lives inside the body, and just as we expect other illnesses and other organs to perhaps be ill and then heal, we can expect the same for people's mental and emotional illnesses. Recovery happens all the time. We need to look for it and recognize it and champion it when it happens.
I think that one of the reasons we want people in recovery is a two-layered. On an individual basis, it gives people hope and joy and a reason to live. That's just human rights. But there's another level to it. And the truth of it is that recovery decreases an economic burden that people see and is actually something that someone that is not in recovery does. Hospitalization, incarceration, all of those things which are used with people with mental health issues as a place to shove them when they don't know what to do with them, those are all major costs to the society. So if you can get folks to recovery and they can no longer access and utilize those institutions, but in turn can start working, becoming taxpayers, becoming part of the community, then that gives back economically. They are no longer a burden. They are no longer a strain. And when we can stop looking at people as that, it's really great for all of us.